Husband ditched our family to join a no relationships allowed cult with his friends. I am 29 and got married 6 years ago, but I have been divorced for 3 years. I have 2 sons with my ex-husband Adam, 30M, aged 4 and 5, but I have full custody of them since he didn't want to be bogged down because of his family. He and I were happily married for 3 years, had 2 beautiful kids, and were even planning on buying our own house, so we could move out of the apartment we lived in, when he suddenly hit me with the, "I want to be single and explore the world right now." We'd been together since high school, so we were all we knew. He was my first everything, and I was his. So I always assumed that for us, it was a together forever kind of thing, and he was fine with not having been with enough people other than me. Still, after 3 years of being married, he told me that he wasn't happy and wanted us both to be free of this burden, talking about our marriage and our family, so we could live our life to the fullest. It was all weird freethinker talk like my dad would refer to it, and I didn't understand any of it because I thought he loved me, and he insisted that he did love me. But he also loved himself apparently and wanted to give himself a fair chance to explore the world. I even suggested opening up our marriage temporarily, no matter how much it hurt me, so that I could ensure he stays married to me and doesn't leave. But he wasn't into that idea and was hellbent on getting divorced, so that we could do this correctly. I was heartbroken after that discussion because it had come from nowhere, and when I started crying in front of him, he told me that it'd all be fine and to have faith in our love because if we were meant to be, he'd find his way back. It was ridiculous and unfair, but that's how our marriage ended. One fine day he just decided to pack his bags and leave so he could explore the world and be on his own for a while, leaving me and his 2 kids behind without giving a damn about what would happen to us. I'd even asked him what he thought would happen to the kids, and he suggested I leave them with someone. I trusted that I should explore world travel, meet new people, and live a generally adventurous life so I could grow. I was stunned because, as far as I'm concerned, if we bring kids into this world, we must ensure we raise them well, protect them, and meet all their needs as parents. You literally cannot and should not go running off to travel the world leaving your kid behind, and that's what convinced me that he was completely off his rocker at the time, so I didn't fight the divorce anymore. I didn't contest it. The settlement was easy since he didn't want anything and was ready to give it all up. His parents were loaded, so the alimony and child support wasn't a big issue. Either he got visitation rights, but he rarely ever visited, and even when he would, he'd make me drop the kids off at his parents' place and then wait in another room so he could meet them without being reminded of the past. But even those visits stopped after the first couple of months. I found out the real reason behind the change in his behavior a lot later from a friend of mine, Rachel, who happened to have a couple of friends in common with Adam, Rachel's cousin. I happened to be part of the friend circle that Adam had been influenced by, and she's the one who told me about them about 2 months after the divorce. I don't blame her for not telling me earlier because she and her cousin weren't close. So she didn't find out the truth until after the divorce. If I had known the truth, it wouldn't have changed anything about the divorce. Rachel's cousin, according to what she told me, led a very promiscuous, wild, and adventurous lifestyle. He and his friend, a group of about 6 or 7 men, believed that relationships shouldn't tie us down, and they had made a pact to remain single. Adam had been introduced to this friend circle by a coworker who believed he'd get along well with these guys even though he wasn't single and couldn't be part of that school of thought given that he was married with 2 kids. But Rachel's cousin had bragged to her and a couple of other family members that they'd managed to convert a guy into believing that he didn't need to stay with his wife and kids and that he needed to shed this dead weight so he could move on and do better in life, and that's what he'd done by divorcing his wife and giving up custody of his kids so he could finally fully commit to their ideology. He'd been bragging about the like status of their group, and how they managed to turn someone into one of them, which meant that something was compelling about their beliefs. So curious. Rachel asked her cousin what this guy looked like because she wanted to know what kind of a man would abandon his family. Because of what his new friend said, especially a married man with 2 kids. Then, when her cousin pointed to Adam in a group photo they'd taken, she put 2 and 2 together and texted me about it as soon as she was out of the event. This had all taken place at a family gathering of hers, and once that was done with, she'd immediately asked me if I was willing to meet what he honestly felt like. I would have been happier if he just slept with another woman. At least, it would have been a more respectable reason to end his marriage and abandon his children. But this just didn't cut it. I wanted to call and curse him out but didn't because after learning the real reason for his departure, I was convinced that he was just crazy. There were no 2 ways about it, and there was also no point in hoping that maybe saying or doing something would make him change his mind. They kept it to a minimum, probably out of shame for what their son had done. They were the ones who were paying the child support installments every month. I knew it because, from what I'd heard, Adam was busy blowing all his money on trips to exotic locations at high-end hotels. Now that he had no family to think of, he could spend all his money on crap like that. Nobody would bat an eye. I raised my kids to the best of my abilities, and now I have 2 sweet, obedient and adorable little guys who love me as a Sunday. We have enough money to buy our own house now, but I've stayed in the same apartment since I love this place, and it's convenient for the commute to work. I should have moved because, unfortunately, since I'd remained in the same place, Adam knew where to find me. He just randomly showed up at our door that day, and I think it must have knocked the wind out of me to see him after almost 3 years. Neither of us said anything for the first couple of seconds, but I took in the bling up, and I didn't want my kids to see whatever ugly fight was about to happen next. Sure enough, as soon as I told my kids to leave, Adam started whining about how this wasn't the welcome back he'd expected. I could hear that he was trying hard not to cry. Still, all that did was just aggravate me even more. He was the one who'd put me through all this crap for years, and now he dared to cry and act like the victim. He then went on to tell me that he'd come back to Apollo better off without him. Nobody missed him in his absence. He went on for a few minutes about how he'd had fun these past few years. But at the end of the day, he felt empty because he had nobody to come home to except empty hotel rooms. He confessed that he'd felt like he'd been missing something for the last couple of months and finally decided to come back and apologize. So he can finally make amends. Time to leave us alone, and that I didn't to see or talk to him at the moment. But Adam, being Adam, believed that he could change my mind by continuing to ramble on, standing outside the door and begging me to return to him. After a point, it started getting on my nerves, and I also had to bring the kids out of their room, so I served them dinner. I just hit the door and yelled that we were not his family anymore, so he needed to leave now. I think that took him in shock later from their son, anyway. But as soon as I was done with those calls, I received a call from Rachel since she'd been the one to inform me about why Adam had left all those years ago. I answered the call because I felt she'd tell me something about Adam. I was right, since as soon as I answered the call, she asked me if Adam had come around, and when I said yes, she told me that her cousin had called her up to inform her why Rachel and I are close friends, and I blame Adam for being so easy to influence. Her cousin had promised us that he'd keep us updated on him and even reached out to apologize once he learned about me. I'd forgiven him since I never had anything against the guy, but we're not friends. He'd tell Rachel what Adam was up to, which is how I knew what he'd been up to since he blocked me after the divorce. So now Rachel's cousin had contacted her to tell her exactly why Adam had returned, and now he was the only fool who'd left his wife and kids behind to travel and have fun with his boys. The other guys, who were now all dating, by the way, told him that it wasn't fair of him to expect that they'd always stick to one school of thought for their entire life, especially when they'd come up with that ideology about not being tied down and stuffed back when they were in their mid-20s, and were still relatively young. But right now, most of the guys were pushing 30 and didn't want that. They congratulated him when he left me, and now they were all trying to get a taste of the life he'd left behind on purpose. Even though the guys were still being supportive. Now, when he told them that he wanted to return to his old life, it wasn't enough for him, and he wanted them to apologize for making him leave his wife and kids. That's what their fight was about. The other guys refused to apologize, and rightfully so. They just told him about their beliefs. But they'd never said this of the guys who were in relationships. He felt the pressure to fit in yet again, and that's why he'd come back to us, not out of any sense of duty or because he felt empty like he told me. Maybe that could have been part of the reason, but it wasn't the whole reason, and when I heard about this from Rachel, my blood boiled because I felt a little guilty for turning him away, and that's why I had to call my parents for reassurance. Had I known these things before he came by, then he would have let him come back at any cost, and neither would I feel bad about it. He never felt bad about what he'd done and put his kids and me through. So I didn't see the need to feel so guilty about it. Either he was just a terrible person, and this was how it would be. So I stole myself for the next attempt to try and come back. But it never happened for the next couple of days. I didn't hear from him, and even though I told Rachel to ask her cousin about him, he told me about a shoe with other people before he went through with it. Of course, he'd discuss everything with his friends before doing anything. But now that Rachel's cousin was blocked, I knew nothing. So naturally, when my in-laws called me 3 days ago, I was caught completely off guard and didn't know what to expect. They told me they were calling to discuss what I'd said to Adam. The other day, when he visited me and made things right with me, I told him my in-laws were right. They'd held up their end of the agreement, and Adam still had visitation rights. He's just not used them in a while. I don't understand what to do right now. On one hand, I wish for my kids to have a father, even though I know I'm enough for them now. But I don't want to deprive him of anything. I don't even know if it's legally my place yet. I can't figure out what to do right now, and my kids are all I'm thinking of now. Ida didn't just mean that Adam and his parents had held up the legal end of the arrangement. But everything else was all me. I'd raised my kids while he had fun with the guys. He doesn't get to pick and choose when he can be a part of our lives and be with us on his terms. Update: I filed for termination of Adam's parental rights earlier today, and I regret not doing so sooner. I should have done it as soon as he stopped coming around to see the kids. After the first few months, that's not okay with me, and I don't think I'm depriving my kids of anything. Since they never had a father anyway, it's not like they'll miss him. Update 3, so I didn't manage to get his rights terminated altogether, but at least now he can only meet the kids as long as I supervise the visits. At least that's something, and he can't just push us around anymore. If he can prove to the court that he's capable and fit to be a consistent father, then maybe we can renew walking off with the kids and leave him and his parents staring at me open-mouthed, which was pretty damn satisfying anyway. That's how it is now. I don't know the future, but I'm glad this all worked well for the children. At least they're my only concern, so now, if Adam can become a responsible father and finally step up as a dad, then maybe my kids won't have to go through life without a dad, and maybe they won't have to learn to shave from online tutorials. But if he... Share your thoughts in the comments. If you like this story, then like and share it with your friends. Follow for more Reddit stories, and also share which type of stories you like most so I make videos of your choice. See you in the next video.